Alright, part 2. I think I did this PBS thing, but I really didn't finish it. It's still at 7 minutes or so, and so we'll play along and do some more. Maybe read some comments if we have time and see how it goes. So anyway, but this whole thing really comes down to, if you can see this simple experiment, the 2-slit experiment, and this even simpler single slit experiment, the small aperture experiment is really what it is. A very simple experiment in a lot of ways, just really simple. And you see what they've done to it. You see how they pervert it and twist it to make it say what they want it to say. And that's a simple experiment. Just imagine what they do to complex experiments where there's lots of moving parts, lots of elements that could be causal, could have an influence that they're not appreciating, a hidden variable. No doubt, lots of that in their experiments.
Possible paths that the particle could take. We have this family of could-be trajectories from start to finish. And for some reason, when the wave reaches the screen, it chooses a final location.
Right. So he's saying that somehow this material causes photons to become confused about where they're going. They travel from point A to point B in a straight line, except when there's some kind of vague amount of opening they can't deal with. So if the opening is a certain limiting factor, many times bigger than the photon itself, right? Maybe 1,000,000 photons can fit in one of those slits, maybe more, who knows. Somehow the photon can't deal with this. It is confused, has to go through both of the slits, and it has to determine that before it gets there, apparently. Somehow. I mean, the whole thing just doesn't make any cognitive sense. Where did the photon decide to go through both the slits? Here, at the source? It figured it out before it even got on its journey that I'm going through both? Where did it do that? How did it do that? Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. I guess they're saying the photon is waving all the way out here. So it's always, everything is feeling, the photon is feeling the entire universe as it travels. Does it really sound like that's something you should believe unless you had like a ton of evidence? Like that's an explanation that's kind of extraordinary. It doesn't seem like an ordinary physics kind of explanation. It seems a very mystical and mushy kind of explanation, like a UFO or something, and that it should require kind of really good evidence, not almost non-existent evidence, and completely useless evidence in the single slit experiment, which doesn't demonstrate any of this comparison to a wave.
That implies choosing from these possible paths. So what causes this transition between a wave of many possibilities and a well-defined thing at a particular spot?
Well, the telling point is part of your sentence is correct and part of your sentence is mush. So the part where, yes, photons go through things, pass by things, and they end up at locations. And if they don't do that in a straight line, it's because they interacted with something that changed their course. And they usually interact with things called matter, electrons, precisely. And that's what happened. The electrons did it.
Within that mysterious span between the creation and the detection, is the particle anything more than a space of possibility?
Well, again, is the particle any more than the space of possibility? I mean, it's just this. Let's just break cause and effect. Let's break physics, right? It's not going to be about anything physical anymore. We're just going to turn into vaporous, vacuous, undefined, Heisenbergy, lost in spacey mush. But of course it's all probabilistic. So it's spacey mush, but it can't do this and it can't do that. Well, at least it used to not be able to. It used to be that the probability was a package that was about this big. And somehow they've now expanded that package to go across the entire universe.
Okay, we're adding more questions than we're answering. We still didn't figure out what the wave is made of. In fact, the answers aren't known.
Okay, there you go. Great. You're so confident and yet you don't have an answer to the most basic question. What's the cake made of? Should we eat it? Oh, okay, we don't know what it's made of, and let's eat it anyway. It could be made of complete bullshit, but we'll eat it anyway, because it's our favorite cake. This doesn't sound reasonable. That's all I'm asking you people to be, is reasonable. Yeah, I know these people are supposed to be smart. It doesn't mean that they're reasonable. So, I mean, this crap, I mean, he's admitting he doesn't know how to construct a model of this photon with radar because, frankly, it sounds frickin' silly. So yeah, he doesn't have any way to do that. Because he can't do that without making empty space incredibly complicated, and somehow it's telling the photon exactly its location and telling it where the target is and what it has to do to fit the probability math. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Or somehow the photon is as complex as some kind of, U.S. Navy battleship. More complex. A U.S. Navy battleship couldn't do what fucking photons do.
But the various interpretations of quantum mechanics do try. Let's talk about the view favored.
Let's talk about the view favored. So this isn't the view. This isn't going to tell you anything. This is just going to tell you the silly interpretations. The silly Copenhagen and then the many worlds mush. This isn't anything about anything real. This is just stuff about what they made up. No evidence for any of this crap. This is just saying, how do we explain this? Well, let's just make up some crap.
By Werner Heisenberg and Niels Bohr, who pioneered quantum mechanics at the University of Copenhagen in the 1920s. The Copenhagen interpretation says that the wave function doesn't have a physical nature. Instead, it's comprised of pure possibility. It's a
pure possibility? I thought it was probability. So again, that's the word probability here. I don't know if possibility is in this statement. So again, there's just subtle breaking of words. All of a sudden now it's a possibility. See, probability again. So there's 3 probabilities. I don't see any possibility here. Yeah, and that's it. But this is the breaking of language, the breaking of the interpretation, the breaking to make it seem like it's possible to do their tunneling and their other nonsense.
Just that a particle traversing the double-slit experiment exists only as a wave of possible locations.
Well, it's not a wave then, okay? So you just call it a packet of possibilities, or more likely, more accurate probabilities. And the probabilities of the preposterous are astronomical possibilities outside of a set amount of likely outcomes. They're highly likely, and then there's stuff that's not really going to happen. Mathematically uncognizable as a reality. And I'd say the math is not even getting that right. Because this stuff, it could say that the probability is 1 in 1 trillion, a zillion. But frankly, you would never have, it's almost like the system reboots before you'd ever have a chance to ever realize that probability. So you're always stuck with the the redoing of the game. So you'll never get to the zillion.
That ultimately encompasses all possible paths. It's only when the particle is detected that a location and the path it took to get there are decided. The Copenhagen...
Yeah, so it only decides when it finishes what it did, which, again, this just breaks cause and effect and, a lot of things. It's just mush. So somehow the photon and working with empty space, somehow those two things together came up with enough brains to figure out the math of trajectories going through two slits, and then they ran it through a accurate randomizing probability computer so they could figure out, so they could see what permutation they got, so they could draw the straws. So what they did is the empty space in the photon took a bunch of straws and, broke one of them and then put them in a bag and then shook them up and then pulled out the straws to see where it was going to land. And, based on what number it picks the short straw, that's the location it goes to. Sorry, I'm making a mocking kind of gesture. I mean, why don't I just believe in aliens? Cross-dressing aliens that carry two purses and wear bananas on their hats and have an extra penis on their hand.
Pagan interpretation calls this transition from a possibility space to a defined set of properties the collapse of the wave function. It tells us that prior to the collapse, it's meaningless to try to define a particle's properties.
Right, it's meaningless to define its properties. Even though you shot it out of a thing, it went towards another thing, it interacted with that thing, and it's still meaningless to talk about the fact that that's what it's doing. It's going from here, it's going there, it's interacting there, and then it's going to a target. And we're supposed to pretend none of that can possibly happen until it hits the target. Yeah, I think it can.
It's almost like the universe is allowing all possibilities to exist simultaneously.
Right, so there's photons that travel 15 billion light years across space to get to us. And by these theories, they're not doing that right now. They're not out there coming towards us right now. They're not there. We couldn't run out there and catch one early. We couldn't, it doesn't exist. Until it hits the telescope, it never left home. That's kind of the implication of this mush. I mean, the thing we're looking at doesn't exist anymore. We do understand that, right? So, I mean, this whole thing does break down at some point, right? You can sort of understand that it doesn't make any logical sense that the photon doesn't have any place in the universe until it collapses, because it can't go back home. It certainly can't stay back home, because back home is gone. I think we know it left. It's en route, and that's a solid fact.
It holds off choosing which actually happened until the last instant. Weirder, those
stupider
different possible paths, those different possible realities, interact with each other. That interaction increases the chance that some paths become real and decreases the chance of others. There's an interaction between possible realities that is seen in the distribution of final positions, in the interference pattern.
Sorry, I couldn't understand any of that. So the photons in all these different realities, it's interacting, it's watching TV, it's learning physics, and then it's now that it's educated, it decides to show up.
Pattern is real, even though the vast majority of paths involved in producing the interference never attain reality.
Never attain reality. The vast majority of the paths never attain reality. Well, I mean, obviously the black bars, those certainly never obtained reality. And the one going to the moon never obtained reality. Yeah, that's right. The one that went right up my ass didn't obtain reality. I don't know what it is with these damn mice. There must be something interfering, or there's got to be some explanation for why I can't keep a mouse working. It's like doing this, like the control button is stuck. I don't think it is, but moving on.
Copenhagen interpretation, that final choice of the experiment of the universe, is fundamentally random within the constraints of the final wave function.
Right, within the constraints of the probability packet. So it's not really random. It's random in the sense that they found a way to draw like a pick six ball randomly. But that's all. There's rules that they put a certain number of balls in the damn thing and they bounce them around and they pick them out. I mean, there's nothing random. The probability wave is dictating what's in, what tickets you can pick. the ticket, the numbers have to go in before you can pull them out, kind of thing.
The theory of quantum mechanics produces stunningly accurate predictions of...
Well, okay, so we've heard all of this stunningly accurate. You can't even accurately, mathematically describe the two-slit experiment. You don't do the two patterns on top of each other with your math. So again, this overstatement of this stunning accuracy derived through this math. Yes, the fact that there's probabilities to outcomes, the fact that there's Newton's glass, that there's rules, and those rules, when done over permutations, produce curves of outcome that are solid and reliable. That's a truth, yes. Quantum mechanics isn't really that. Quantum mechanics isn't acknowledging the fact that you're looking at something over time and saying, what is its statistical reliability? You could do it with almost anything statistically. You know, the curve for heart attacks in men and what age and whatever it is. And yes, every year the stuff will come out pretty close to those statistical averages. That's not magic. And certainly you don't need quantum mechanics to recognize that there's rules and that those rules will produce a probabilistic outcome over time, a statistical outcome. That's not magic either. So all this talk that we somehow need quantum mechanics, this nutty wave theory crap, to recognize that lots of rules about how photons and electrons interact, there isn't even a lot of them, but there's rules about every compound creates a different rule, okay, because it can move in a different way. And its movement will dictate the rule. You know, there's a rule based on you know, for how fast the speed of light will be transmitted through different substances. Every substance has a different rule. So yeah, the probabilities of reflection and refraction and all this stuff will be different for each substance. But the fact that the substance is going to over time act in a consistent manner, you don't need quantum mechanics to understand that. So quit pretending quantum mechanics is making that visible. That was visible without it. Newton found that. Newton found how there was a difference in the reflectivity of glass based on its thickness. Newton did that without quantum mechanics. He found the rule.
Reality. And it's completely consistent with the Copenhagen interpretation.
It's completely consistent. You mean the interpretation is completely consistent, but either way, it just doesn't matter. Why don't you say something important like how the evidence is irrefutable, or how there's no other possible explanation, or something stupid like that. You know, rather than this mush, that you have a phantasmagorical explanation that works. Well, yeah, my invisible man explanation for every crime ever committed works. But we can logically deduce that it's probably not the truth. And likewise, we can logically deduce that this fantasy explanation of photons with radar is just an invisible man story, and it really has no chance of being the real frickin' story.
But this is not the only interpretation that works. There are interpretations that give the wave function a physical reality. Remember, we know that...
Yeah, but physical reality doesn't mean anything because we multi-dimensionalize physical reality, so now there's a bunch of reality. Now there's realities all over the place. They're everywhere. There's just reality here, reality there, reality, 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 and they're all doing something different. I mean...
Light is a wave in the electromagnetic field.
Okay, so it's a wave in the electromagnetic field. He said that again. So let's understand what the implications of that is. So he's basically arguing that the electromagnetic field exists even when it's not present, like where you could measure it. So I don't need a magnet to have an electromagnetic field. Now that's sort of my argument, except I would argue the field is gravity, and it's moving. But that's, see the implications of this? He's using a medium now. He said it twice. So he's basically saying that light is a wave in something, a medium. Now, shouldn't that come with some sort of announcement or some sort of parade? We found the ether. Tesla was right. I mean, you can't have it both ways.
Field theory.
I mean, then you have to explain your... Yeah, field theory. Now you have to explain what your field is made of. And what you're going to do as a colossal mistake is make a dead field and not realize that the field is active, and that's gravity.
Tells us that all fundamental particles are waves in their own fields.
All fundamental particles. So again, now what are we talking about? These things aren't particles. An electron is a collection of particles, but he's saying that electrons are in their own special kind of electron fields. Now, no, there's one field. You can have a frequency in it, or you can have polarization in it, but it's one field.
This may give us a more physical medium that drives these waves of possibility.
Drives them now. So now it's driving the possibility. So, so now once you create this medium, now I can really make the argument that, well, then this interaction with the two-slit experiment really doesn't have to do with this wave not knowing where it is. It has to do with the fact that the matter is disturbing the field. Right?
And if you thought the Copenhagen interpretation was freaky, wait till we get to the many worlds interpretation, which we will, right here on Spacetime. Thanks to the Great Courses.
Oh, so that he's whipping out. Somehow I guess that must be his favorite because he's going to devote a whole show to it. I guess.
For sponsoring this episode. The Great Courses Plus is a service that allows you to learn about a range of topics from educators, including Ivy League professors and other teachers from around the world. Go to the Great Course...
Yeah, well, I mean, you people selling information this bad. Okay, so this has got 500,000 views, 12,000 likes, only 235 dislikes. And it's basically rubbish. It's junk science. It isn't fair to the physical evidence, isn't fair to the experimental results. It's just a huge pile of made up junk. They're junk explanations. They're not evidence-based. They're not fact-checked tested, well tested theory. They're just mush that can be unraveled and exposed for the junk that it is. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it really is just horrible. So anyway, so I think I'll read the couple of comments and leave it at that. And you know, I do want to get to the tunneling video, but I think I'm going to do the Einstein's other stuff first. You know, somebody did this, whatever, horrible show talking about Einstein, and most of it was just a waste of time talking about his personal crap. But yeah, I mean, Einstein, you know, they're very, they're very clever and interesting attempts to create a mechanism, a model. But they're just not right. They can be thought experimented and exposed for not being right. Well, in some ways, I mean, the whole bent space thing is just such a, that's an invisible man one. I mean, you can't disprove it. You can only disprove it by saying, what do you mean? You know, you people are supposed to be physicists, and now you're not gonna, I mean, why even bother getting into describing what particles look like if there's some sort of structure to space that actually bends? The thing that is a nothing actually has a whole superstructure that changes, and somehow the matter knows the superstructure changed. I mean, come on. It's just terrible. Alright, so it's this logical empiricist guy. He just does not give up. So I guess I'll play his oldest comment first, but it's the same crap over and over. So this is a guy who has posted links to crappy experiments, and I've debunked his evidence. So he has challenged me, and I have demonstrated that he challenges me with junk science. He posts me to like for example, somebody had attempted to duplicate the Einstein lensing experiment, and it was a colossal failure. And yes, they came up with a positive result, but it didn't escape their own error of the margin of error. So it's useless as scientific evidence of anything. The original experiment was pretty much useless, and I don't even think they had the decency to calculate a margin of error. But again, it hasn't been proven. They keep talking as if this truth that Einstein's formula works. It doesn't work, and it's not a huge failure on Einstein's part in the sense that he's just giving light mass when it's kind of inappropriate, because light's a force. Even though it does, in my opinion, have mass in the direction it's moving, it doesn't really matter because force isn't affected by force. So it can't be gravitationally relevant. Anyway, this is not science. Whatever. What I'm arguing is the stuff I'm exposing is the stuff that's not science. Unrepeated experiments and preposterously unsupported claims. This is brainstorming on humbug mostly. I don't even know what that means, but it really doesn't matter. What this is a plea for physics not to be a religion. Believe me, there is real science out there. Why should I believe you? You're a compulsive, shit-talking troll. You've repeatedly posted evidence that sucks. Yeah, no. Why should I believe you? There are actual scientists doing actual work. Well, it doesn't really matter. We're talking about one specific part of science, not all of science. I'm not talking about some farmer putting some chemistry down on his farm and saying he's a bad scientist because he's a scientist. I'm not saying all science is corrupt and horrible. I'm not saying all statements made by science are untrue. We're talking about theoretical physics, and specifically a working model of the dynamics or the mechanism of the nuclear engine, you could say. But that's what we're talking about, one specific part of science, asshole. They are not just sitting in their huts smoking and coming up with new theories. Well, Einstein did do that. He sat in his hut and smoked a pipe, for fuck's sake, about how the cosmos works. Again, I would say most good scientists do a lot of that. Spend a lot of time sitting in their hut or their living room or wherever thinking. They are doing actual mathematics. Well, again, mathematics is only one. It's a tool that you can use. It's a shortcut in a sense because it defines relationships in a way where you don't have to like add up all the beans in the jar. It gives you some advantages in the sense that I could say you could talk about gravity deteriorating per square inch. Well, mathematics will give you the ability to multiply that over miles and save you some work. But that's what mathematics does. Mathematics doesn't describe reality in the sense that it doesn't give you a mechanical actual model of the reality in miniature or something. It doesn't give it to you. It's not a scale model, so to speak. It's a general model, and yeah, and it's just dependent on how much knowledge you have, how good the formula is, and that's it. It's not just because you write a formula and it's generally true doesn't mean that it's accurate in the sense that it's complete. And there's been lots of formulas that had to be fixed because they weren't complete. Anyway, and science in offices and university departments. Well, whatever. Again, this is an argument about a specific argument about the range of subject matter that's related to theoretical physics, which does end up getting into cosmology and these other subjects because of the fact that they're using the same force, gravity, becomes relevant in both, and this obviously light is part of both, and so misinterpretations in one will end up bleeding into the other subject. What faculty do you belong to in Mendham? So again, this argument that somehow you have to belong to a faculty to have any kind of what is your alma mater? Like you have to somehow, the institution will tell you what the truth is, and you don't ever acquire knowledge by, let's say, watching lectures on YouTube. It's not possible to acquire knowledge that way. You can't become educated that way in this asshole's opinion. Dude, fuck you. You barely passed high school. It doesn't really matter what I did. I didn't just barely pass anyway, but whatever. I barely did any work and passed. You did never go to college, of course. Well, I was accepted at some pretty good colleges. You have no idea how hard it is to do real science. Well, again, and you do because you dropped out of physics in college. I see. That makes you an expert. It's hard because you couldn't do it. It is not just brainstorming in your living room about what could be. Well, again, theoretical physics is. So you can keep saying that, but that's exactly what theoretical physics is. But to elaborate theories based on hard mathematics, no, based on hard evidence. So again, this reliance on the fact that you think the only way to understand the universe is to understand it in terms of numbers, and I don't think Einstein did that. I don't think anybody does that. I don't even think mathematicians do that. I think they understand that the Earth isn't just its mass, it's its volume and its density. So it's lots of different kinds of numbers, and that's going to be understood by understanding it as a thing in the universe. Models work as descriptions. Physical models are that's what they do with molecules. Why don't you tell people, why don't you tell all the chemists that they're cheating because they're using physical models to describe the function of their chemistry? Why don't you tell them they're supposed to just use mathematics? That they're only allowed to use mathematics. All they can do is define the atomic weight of the atoms and you know, some other numbers, and just do it all with numbers. They can't possibly make an actual physical model. Asshole. What you're doing is bad. What you're doing is natural philosophy. Well, again, you can call it whatever. What you're doing is verbal diarrhea or verbal vomit. You're just a shit-talking asswipe there. I don't accept your argument that natural philosophy is a thing and there's something unnaturally philosophical. What I'm making is a rational argument challenging the integrity of your conclusions by challenging the integrity of your evidence and the reasoning you apply to it, and whether or not you actually looked for a better explanation. You know, whether you gave a better explanation a fair chance. And I'm making that argument, and I'm saying you people are biased, you're fundamentally religious kooks, you want this babble to be true because you don't want a physical description of reality that takes away your free will or something. No one in their right mind would attempt to rewrite physics. They're all attempting to do that right now, so I don't think there's any theoretical physicist who is sitting around saying everything's been done just right. Yeah, it all makes perfect sense. No, none of them are doing that. Without knowing any of the subject. Well, again, you keep saying I don't know any of the subject, and I'll challenge that argument by saying I know plenty on the subject, and I've demonstrated that. And if I was making all kinds of factual errors, why don't you point them out? Oh, yeah, that would be the simple solution, wouldn't it? You could just point out how I've made a ton of these factual errors. You could quote my factual error. Okay, I mean, not some language error. But a real error, a real fundamental thing I've said that's provably wrong. Why don't you do that, cheater, liar, scumbag? Oh, that's right, because you're a ballless troll. Neither math. Well, I'll admit I don't know tensors and stressors and you know, all the rest of the strangled convoluted math. No, I don't. But I understand what the math is doing, which is accounting for relationships over time. And they're proportional relationships. That's what fractions kind of demonstrate, is a proportional relationship. So I know that, and I think that's all you need to know. Like I said, most of the math is probably not disagreeable, except when they put into the math some conclusion. Like I said, Einstein assumed, okay, that light is like matter, that it will behave like matter. So it's just matter with a very small weight. Well, that's not what light is. It's not matter, it's force. It is simply not possible to do that. Well, it says you. I think all the great scientists did that. So I think you're silly and stupid and ignorant and dumb. Alright, this video shows little or no respect towards real science or real scientists. Well, again, if you tell me who the scientist is and what he's claiming to be true based on what evidence and how he demonstrates his knowledge of his own subject, well, then you might have an argument. But I'm saying that, yes, any scientist who talks about dark matter being proven is an idiot. Deserves to be ridiculed because he has no proof of it at all. None whatsoever. It's self-validating nonsense. The very fact that the dark matter is necessary sort of proves the necessity of the dark matter. It's like me saying, well, this crime is so complicated that it proves the Invisible Man must exist because only the Invisible Man could pull it off. That's silly. I have never come across such brash and vitriolic rant against science and scientists. Well, again, I love science. I love facts. I love the truth. You know, there's a lot of great scientists in history, you know, the Pasteur and the Curies and all of that stuff, doing great science. But these people doing this theoretical crap aren't doing great science. They have wrong premises that they've accepted with rigidity, and they will hear nothing else, and they will build everything. They will use any mechanism necessary to defend the nonsense. Again, defend Huygens, logical imperialist. Go ahead, explain to me how it's possible to have an infinite number of wavelets inside a fixed dimension. Go ahead and explain to me how physics allows that. Go ahead, as a principle. And then explain to me why this principle is only applied in one experiment and none others on Earth. Go ahead and explain that. Not even from creationists. No, I think obviously these people are the religious kooks defending a dogma. They don't have evidence of gravitational lensing. They don't have evidence of any wave of light ever existing ever. They have no evidence that light has ever been affected by any force. None. Okay, so somebody said, did you actually watch the video? So they point out it's just ad hominem attacks, and so he's been accused of ad hominem attacks, and he just makes more of them. You're just such an, I mean, this is pointless wasting time on this asshole, right? So, I mean, I'm just going to block him from now on. Yes, I did watch the video. What's your point? I am kind of a scientist. Somebody asked him what does that mean? A kind of a scientist. So he went to a formal school and dropped out of physics, and that qualifies him. But if I watch all the 800 series lectures from MIT, plus Stanford, plus Yale, that doesn't qualify me to be anything. And Feynman, all the Feynman lectures. I don't gain anything from that. Okay. I am kind of a scientist and I have many scientist friends. Why don't you get one of your friends to ball up and actually point out what I've said that's inaccurate, that they can prove to be wrong. I know how science works. Why don't fuck you instead of you and amend them. I don't even know I don't even know what to say to something that's silly. You know how science works. I mean, a preposterous statement. You don't understand what experimental evidence is, and that's the core of science. The core of science is evidence, and evidence is in two forms: physical evidence or logical evidence, in the sense of you propose something and somebody demonstrates it to be unreasonable or without reasonable foundation or challengeable by a million other theories of equal silliness. Theoretical science is not just sitting on your ass and making shit up on the go. Well, again, I would say that dark matter is sitting on your ass and making shit up. Huygens is a desperate effort to make something up to fix an experiment that demonstrates wave theory to be shit. Huygens was one of the early supporters of quantum mechanics, of wave theory. He knew the single slit experiment destroys it, and he had to come up with some way to fix that. And the way was to make these magical little mini waves that never have been observed to exist in any circumstance ever in the history of waves, and yet we're going to assume they exist, and we're only going to assume they exist though in one experiment. And you call that good science? I call that's duplicity. That's lying. Huygens is a lie. you need to at least allude to empirical tests which could falsify your theory. Well, again, this argument about the falsifying the theory. I'm falsifying your theory, asshole. I'm saying light doesn't get bent by any force ever, and you're the one who has to demonstrate that it does. I'm saying what is proven by every single experiment ever done proves me right, and the only experiments that prove you right are ones that can't escape their margin of error. You don't have a good experiment unless if you're going to use Edinburgh's experiment and live by it. I'm just going to read you his own notes and point out to you how he had no confidence in the results of his experiment because he knew it was a piece of rubbish. So you have nothing. I'll point to the non-existent Hubble photographs of solar lensing. What do I have to prove? Every single physical experiment agrees with me. I don't have to prove anything. You have to prove something. You have to prove there's dark matter. I'm saying it's a canard. It's completely made up. Take a picture of some of it. Show me it. Anyway, theoretical physics also depends on a high degree on mathematics. Well, again, you say it depends on mathematics as if the mathematics makes the physics. The mathematics is a description of relationships. And if you misidentify the relationships, your mathematics is useless. So again, to say you have mathematics that proves the invisible man exists, well, I'm sure you could engineer mathematics to do that, but that's not useful or anything. You're just explaining how we don't have enough information to rule that out. I can't prove something else did it, so you can just make something up. Well, that's bullshit. Alright, you cannot do science instead of doing the math. Well, again, I don't why should I redo math? I've made this argument before. I'm saying there's very few mathematical equations in physics that I'll say are wrong. I'll say that Einstein's math for gravitational lensing is wrong, but it's only wrong because of his assumption that photons have photons don't have mass in their perpendicular dimension, perpendicular to their velocity. They can't possibly be bent because they don't have any mass in those dimensions. They only have mass in one dimension. And they have complete mass in that dimension, in the sense you can't make them go faster and you can't make them go slower. What else can be said about that? So anyway, but yeah, so again, there's no mathematics I disagree with necessarily. I mean, not on its face. I'd say there's lots of math that's not complete. Clearly, quantum mechanics, the math they used to do even the two-slit experiment, is incomplete. You cannot do science instead of doing the math. It is the language the book of physics is written in. Well, again, I think that's just absolute nonsense. Physics is a mechanical, physical thing. Like an engine, you can draw a blueprint of it. There's a blueprint of reality, and the blueprint doesn't need math. It just needs an understanding of the relationships, and like the chessboard. Chess isn't just math. Who does chess mathematically? Not too many players, I don't think. Inmendum sets back science at least 500 years with his natural philosophy. Well, again, this accusation that my philosophy is something you can call natural philosophy, as if you have some right to do that. That you have some qualified reason to do that. Again, I'll just call you a religious kook, and we'll say, okay, fair enough. You're a crazy religious fanatic. Also in science, it doesn't matter how loud you can scream at others and your opponents. Well, irrelevant. It doesn't matter at all. Well, again, it doesn't really matter how loud. You're the one worried about it somehow, asshole. I'm not. I don't care how loud they talk. That's not going to bother me. I'll watch the lecture. I don't care if they have some stupid mannerism. I don't care what it is. I'll still watch. I'm not deterred by that kind of nonsense. Clearly it bothers you somehow, fuckhead. Because you're a little pussy. It also doesn't matter how rude you can possibly get. Well, again, I'll be rude to religious kooks, and I'll be rude to liars. And this video qualifies as a lie. He's deliberately evading the single slit experiment to propagandize. And that's all this was. This was a propaganda film in support of quantum mechanics. He didn't treat the evidence fairly, and I think that's obnoxious. It doesn't make your theories any more correct. It doesn't make his correct, is the point. And my arguments do cast doubt on the credibility of these conclusions by pointing out that the evidence they're citing doesn't support the strength of their conclusion. On the opposite, most scientists are quite jolly fellows who cares and enjoy the debate with opponents. I'd say most scientists are pretty petty, and I've seen them block people from message boards, and I've seen them shut down conversations because, yeah, they don't have the goods. And I certainly haven't seen any real debate about any of this crap. So it seems to me that it's dangerous for your career to be a troublemaker, and so I don't think they make trouble. They admit when they have been wrong. No, they're coerced into once in a while doing that, like the crippled guy with ALS there bowed to this silly crap because he just wanted to get out of the argument. But frankly, he just bailed out. He didn't. It wasn't like there was any proof of this information crap. And don't adhere to dogma. Well, I'm sorry. This is dogma. This is a religious theory. Copenhagen, many worlds. These are religious interpretations. They have no facts, no evidence. They're just making this shit up. And for you not to recognize that that's all it is, it's a three-bear story. It's just a fable. This is everything that is wrong within Minderman science. Well, again, I'll prove you wrong and to be nothing but a slandering troll. He couldn't play the big game, so he has to play the little game. I could play whatever. I'm just saying I'm making an argument. All you're doing is saying, no, but you're not making an argument. To a bunch of idiots on YouTube who believe every word the man says. Well, there's no evidence of anybody doing that. But regardless, it's irrelevant. Whether I make a video or whether I write it on a piece of paper or no matter how I convey the point is you're not arguing the points, you're not arguing the argument, you're arguing the arguer. So fuck you, idiot. Minden physics is more like a cult belief than a science. Well, again, you're the one who doesn't have an argument. That's like a religion. God did it. God says so. That's all you're saying. You just keep saying. My institution says so. My institution says so. Nobody else can know the truth. Only my institution tells the truth. Isn't that all you're doing here, asshole? You're not making an argument. You're not pointing out where the evidence of your God is. Where's your evidence? Where's the evidence in the single slit experiment that light is a wave? It is simply not possible anymore to do the single-minded hermit genius thing. I don't think you need to be a genius. You just need not to be a closed-minded disciple. And that's what physicists are. They're disciples. They keep getting told, you're not going to understand this. It all sounds crazy. You're not going to understand it. If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you're insane because you can't understand it. They keep being told that this is the rule. Understanding is verboten. It's supposed to not make sense, and so they think that's the way it's supposed to be because everybody else says so. And so it's just a bunch of emperors and naked emperors, and they're all playing their naked game. But this has nothing to do with being reasonable and evaluating evidence clean and rationally. They keep evaluating the evidence based on how it's been slandered by their quantum mechanics. It is at least 500 years too late for that. Well, I don't even know why you need to go back 500 years, but it doesn't really matter. Like I said, the first particle gravity theory was 300 years ago, and with a tiny bit of imagination applied to that concept, it fits the existing puzzle pieces. They had a couple of the pieces then. They had the inverse square law. They had this idea that gravity was an essential thing. It didn't matter about how heavy you were and this and that and that. It just mattered how many, you have an atomic weight, and the atomic weight is going to sit there and be affected. Every little bit of you is going to move individually. So they had some concept of that, and that's those two puzzle pieces, and the idea of a straight line force explains it. Explains shadows. Straight line force explains shadows, and shadows shadows reveal the idea of less pressure. If you just think of light as pressure, and just think of bright areas as having high pressure and dark areas as having low pressure, it fits the existing pieces, and if they just worked on it a little bit, they see that that's the explanation. That's where it lies, in the idea of straight line force. Gravity is perfectly understandable as a straight line force. Alright, enough of that. So, I'll probably do a live room, but I don't know whether maybe I'll do the other Einstein relativity theories first, or I'll see what I choose to do. Something like that. I mean, especially, the time dilation, they use these, I don't want to get into it, but I mean, they use the idea of a light clock, and it's just such a cheat again, because now they're using the constant, which is the speed of light, and of course the relationship will be revealed then, because you're using something related to the absolute, which is the speed of light. So that's the absolute velocity. Complete velocity would be moving the speed of light. Everything else is something more complicated you're doing. If you go in a straight line, you move the speed of light. If the bit moves in some other line, then it's doing something else, and it won't be moving the speed of light because it's doing something else. I mean, it won't cover the same distance that it would if it was moving the speed of light. Wrong answer to say it's not moving the speed of light. The point is it won't be traveling the speed of light in terms of its acquisition of distance, because it's going the long way around, and it's the shortening of the path is pretty much what increasing your acceleration is, essentially shortening your path. It's taking the curls out of your structure, and so obviously a light clock would illustrate that by the moving proportionally. It'll proportionally reveal that, but anything based on the speed of light would reveal it. Now let's see them do it with an hourglass. That clock ain't going to do it. Because obviously you accelerate an hourglass, all the sand gets moved to the back and it'll never fall down the hole. Anyway, so till next time and such.